All right, let's get straight to it. Today we're digging into the harsh economic reality facing the United Kingdom. The bill is finally coming due, and it has a name. We're talking about friction.
Just read that. We're back on the island of instability. That's the new reality. For decades, the UK was the gateway to Europe, the economic hub. Well, that's over. That position is fundamentally broken. All those old certainties, gone. What's left is a kind of instability, and believe me, the markets are watching this like a hawk.
So, what are we really talking about here? It's this concept, the friction tax. Now, you gotta understand, this isn't some formal tax the government slaps on you. No, it's a self-inflicted wound, a massive new wall of red tape and costs. Think about it. Every single crate of parts, every pallet of food that crosses the channel now slams into this wall, a wall that just wasn't there before. It's like watching a slow-motion car crash right on the country's balance sheet.
All right, let's talk numbers. Let's quantify this economic damage. And let me be clear, we're not talking about some temporary dip or a little recession. No, the data is pointing to something much, much more permanent.
And here it is, the number they really don't want you to focus on. 4%. And this isn't my number, this is from the Office for Budget Responsibility. The UK economy is permanently 4% smaller than it should have been. Think about that. That's not a one-off hit. That's a permanent hole blown in the side of the economy. A loss of potential that has to be paid for year after year after year.
So that 4% loss, it leads you directly to this question. Really, why would a global Goliath, a Microsoft, a Toyota, one of the big boys, why would they choose to double down and build their future in the UK now? The logic of big business is absolutely brutal, and it's simple. Money follows the path of least resistance. It goes to the biggest markets. And this chart, wow, it just lays it all out. This shows you the consequence plain as day. Look at UK business investment. It's a flat line, a complete desert since 2016. Meanwhile, what are our competitors doing? The rest of the G7? They're growing. See, capital has no loyalty. It goes where it's treated best, where it can grow. And right now, that place is clearly not the UK. So where's all that money going? Well, it's not exactly a state secret. The global giants, they're setting up shop elsewhere. They're building their new AI hubs, their new green tech centers, but they're doing it in Dublin, in Paris, in Madrid. They're not waiting around for things to get better. They're moving to where the access is. They're leaving the UK behind to deal with its own friction.
Okay, so we've looked at the big picture, the lost investment. Now let's drill down to a very specific, very real cost. A cost that's hitting businesses and, well, you, right now. It goes by this fancy name, the Border Target Operating Model, BTOM. Sounds important, right? But let's be honest. All it really means, more paperwork, more checks, more delays. This is the nuts and bolts of that friction tax we talked about. And believe me, it is in full effect. And here's how it works. It's painfully simple, really. Goods from the EU arrive at the border. Then they get hit with new physical checks. On top of that, they need new customs declarations. Every single one of these steps adds time and it adds money. And guess what? That cost doesn't just vanish into thin air. Nope, it gets passed right down the line to importers and eventually to consumers. So what's the price tag on all this new bureaucracy? Well, for just one sector, food, it's £3 billion. Let that sink in. £3 billion. That's the added cost for food imports every single year. This is a special kind of inflation, It's imported. The Bank of England's interest rates can't touch this. It's just baked right into the system. And that's how it becomes a direct hit to your wallet. You can call it what it is, a sovereignty tax. A tax you pay every time you're at the checkout counter. A political decision has turned into a very real, very tangible cost for every single household. All of this, it points to a much bigger, much more fundamental problem. In today's global economy, the name of the game is scale. And the bottom line is, Britain just doesn't have it anymore. It's lost its scale. Just look at the world's powerhouses. You've got the United States and you've got the European Union. They operate on a continental scale. They have massive internal markets. The UK? It's now an island, on its own, trying to compete with these continents, and it's losing. Look, even here in the US, while we're juggling our own $39 trillion debt, our sheer scale gives us a buffer, a resilience that the UK simply doesn't have anymore. And you don't have to take my word for it. The markets see it with absolute clarity. You see the S&P 500 showing the strength of the US engine. But look at where the smart money is going when it comes to the UK. It's rotating out of the pound. Where's it going? Into the euro, into the dollar. That's not just a market trend, that's a vote of no confidence. At the end of the day, this was the trade-off, wasn't it?
They traded access for control. Access to the world's biggest single market was swapped for control. But here's the hard truth. In today's globalized world, control without volume, without scale, it's just another word for poverty. It's an illusion that leads down a very dangerous path.
And that brings us to the final, very sobering question. With the economy already weakened, already hobbled by this permanent friction, what happens when the next global shock hits? Because there's always a next one. Could a sudden energy shock be the final blow? The event that finally ends the UK's industrial dream for good? The thing to watch is the cost of trade. That's the only number that never lies. I'll see you at the open.